Okay, so I do want to start with an introduction of sort of the agenda for this evening. We're going to run through a few items. We're going to do a few breakout groups to share some ideas, and then we'll reconvene, do a little summary of those breakout groups, and then talk about next steps. Okay. So the first question, I think, really just to sort of as an icebreaker here and get into items is, do you live in the Odenton Town Center? And you should be receiving a poll here shortly. Okay. So it looks like almost an even split here, where half of the folks are actually do live in the Odenton Town Center growth management area, that area here in yellow, noted by the dotted outline. So this will also be, this will be interesting to talk about then when we also get into our breakout groups, sort of understanding if you don't live in the Odenton Town Center growth management area, yeah, what is your interest then with planning within this area? So as for context, the Odenton Town Center growth management area, again, this area, some people refer to it as a snail or the turtle. It's a large area. It's about 1,233 acres. It is one of the designated town centers within the county. So one of those areas within the county where we're looking to direct growth and redevelopment. And again, looking at some of the smart growth principles, that would accommodate any of the type of growth or development that would have otherwise occurred in some of the more rural areas. So targeting these areas where there is already development, opportunities for redevelopment, and existing infrastructure. Development for the Odenton Town Center is currently regulated by the Odenton Town Center Master Plan. This does set up some tricky situations because the county code is often the place where you go to find what your zoning district is, what the development regulations are, what the design standards are. But in this case, the Odenton Town Center is the regulatory document for this area within the county. And one thing that we're going to try to accomplish here in the update to the master plan is pulling out those requirements and putting those into the code and allow the master plan to function more as a broad level goals and policies and strategies for the Odenton Town Center. So we also, like I introduced Teresa, and I think I saw Martin Schroeder join the line. There is the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee, and they're charged with being advocates for the plan. So really being in tune with what's happening in the community and sharing then the okay. 1 second. And sharing those opinions with the Office of Planning and Zoning. They're also charged with reviewing and commenting on development applications. So before a developer officially submits a development application to the Office of Planning and Zoning, they're required to come to the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee and present. And the advisory committee then has the opportunity to say, hey, you know, this does fit within the vision, the goals, policies of the Odenton Town Center Master Plan, and help fine tune then some of the what the development is proposed to be. And again, is advising the Office of Planning and Zoning on keeping the plan up to date. So over the past 5 years, there have been situations where there have been developments by right, like a gas station, for example, within the core of the town center, which is around the MARC train station. And while that is a permitted use, there have been situations where the committee has said, look, you know, this isn't quite the type of development that we want to see around a train station. We'd rather see some type of more mixed use, retail on the bottom, residential above that, higher density type of development around the train station. So again, they're able to communicate to the Office of Planning and Zoning those perspectives from the community. So for some history, the Odenton Town Center Master Plan, or some form of it, actually began about 50 years ago. And that vision back then was, again, to create an attractive, livable, and economically viable town center. There were additional updates over the next 20 or so years. And then in 2003 is when zoning, the unique zoning within the Odenton Town Center was adopted. And with that, it got more development controls and new design standards. Most of what you see today, but then tweaked over the years of 2009 and the current version of 2016 today. So we want to look back at some of the past successes, and we'll talk about some of the challenges as well. So over the past, again, 50 years, like I said, is with some of the principles of smart growth, you want to identify where you want to grow, where you want to focus development, and the capital investments or capital improvements within the county. So to help facilitate some of that increased growth or development, the county has invested in infrastructure improvements like water and sewer lines throughout the Odenton Town Center, partnered with the State Highway Administration for road improvements. For example, outside of Fort Meade, Maryland 175 has been expanded to about 4 or 5 lanes, as well as a hiker-biker trail. The county is currently actually engaged in a grid street study, and that is looking at that gridded street network more or less near the train station, including streets like Duckins, Hale Street, Baldwin, Nevada, to name a few. And the idea there is coming up with a better set of design guidelines to make sure that there's better accessibility, mobility throughout that core area, as well as making sure that there are bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And something that came up actually at the noon meeting was beautification, making sure that we're including that concept of beautification within these studies to make sure that the streetscape looks good and is inviting to pedestrians as well as bicyclists. There are a few new residential projects: Flats 170 along Maryland 170, the Shirley along Town Center Boulevard, as well as a couple other residential developments within the core. The county, along with the state, there are some funding programs, again, to help facilitate and encourage the growth within the Odenton Town Center, or even in some of the other challenged areas within the town center. So these programs help open up funding for the private projects, and they can range from state designated TOD areas to the county's sustainable community designation. And then the county also has a tax increment financing district that can help pay for capital projects within the Odenton Town Center. So current challenges, again, is because we've been at this for 50 years. We've heard from folks that say nothing's happened over the past 50 years. I've shared with you some past successes, but we do acknowledge that there are some challenges. We had a proposal for mixed-use development at the Mark train station and within the core area several years ago, but unfortunately that fell through a couple of years ago. But the county and the state are still interested in some type of project there, even if it's just a parking garage to start with, and then that wouldn't then preclude any type of mixed-use development. Again, mixed use being retail on the ground floor and residential above that, very similar to what you would find across the street at the village at Odenton Station. Some of these projects are, or I should say, some of the properties are about an acre or less than an acre, which makes timing and cohesiveness of these projects a little challenging, where the county cannot dictate a private property owner when to build or what to build, or I should say, what type of use to build. So you may have projects that are adjacent to, or you might have properties next to each other, where one property may be proposing one thing, and then another 5 years from now, the adjacent property owner proposes one thing, but there's no cohesiveness then between those two projects. So we understand that, and that's something we'll be taking a look at as we do the update to the master plan. So one thing I like to say here is with community amenities, even though this is a current challenge, I'm hoping that in the next few years that we can move this over to the successes column, because right now there is a community park proposed and in the draft budget at the library site, so that wooded area by the library. And again, it would be more of a passive park with trails, maybe potentially a small amphitheater or dog parks, but for the most part, very passive. And but we do understand that we've heard from folks that say that there isn't enough green space within Odenton. So hopefully this will make a dent into that. And but I think there can always be a need for more. Public transportation. We have one of the state's biggest employer, if not the biggest employer, right next door, being Fort Meade and NSA. And we've heard that there are traffic concerns along Maryland 175 and Route 32. One potential solution to that would be more better frequency for public transportation and more options for public transportation. And that could also include bike and pedestrian trails. So right now there is one access point, I think it's called the Pepper Gate, along Odenton Road that gets you into Fort Meade as well from the train. That's easy access from the train station. So that's one thing that we'll look at as well. How can we increase some of the public transportation options as well as the bike ped facilities? And sort of like what I alluded to before is making sure that development matches the community's vision. Oftentimes when developers present to the community or to the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee, the committee is always looking for, does this provide a type of community benefit? Is this something that I could bring my family to, that we could just walk around? Really creates more of an inviting space. So again, we want to make sure that when we do this update, that we're making sure that we identify what those uses are and the type of development that matches community vision. Put that in the master plan, and then if we can codify that, put that in the county code. So let me start the second poll here. And we want to know, how often do you visit the shops or services within the Odenton Town Center? So I'll give you a little bit of time to fill out that poll. And for our facilitators, this is one of those other items that we can talk about and drill down about, you know, why would you visit the Odenton Town Center, or why don't you visit the Odenton Town Center? Okay, so we've got good foot traffic in Odenton Town Center. We've got less than, or I'm sorry, quite the opposite, is less than 3 times a week is when folks are visiting the town center. So this is one of those items that we're going to want to talk about a little bit more when we do our breakout groups of what's preventing you. Are there other retail centers within the area, like Wall Chapel, that's more of a draw than the Odenton Town Center? So we'll talk about that some more. So the third question then is, again, COVID threw a wrench in things. So we want to know, how often did you ride the MARC train pre-COVID? Okay. Something that we had heard about at the noon session was there's not enough parking. And does that preclude folks from taking the train? So as you can see here, kind of split here between less than 2 times a week and more than 2 times a week. So again, as facilitators, let's take note of that and talk about that a little bit more. Oops, I'm sorry. So here are the results then. Okay. So to also put this in context, the general development plan, which for some of you that might have been following, is currently at County Council. It's currently at its legislative phase here in the process. But that Plan 2040, the countywide general development plan, really sets the foundation for how the rest of these functional plans or area plans within the county are going to follow and be, again, aligned with the recommendations and really vision of Plan 2040. So I do want to mention just a few items here of the direction, again, if it passes and gets adopted, some of the items that we would want to sort of sync up with or align with. So within the vision themes of Plan 2040, we talk about the support for town centers, which this is, mixed use development, which is something with, again, retail on the bottom floor, residential above it, really creates that nice density, more of a live work type of environment. Transit-oriented development, which again, having the core area and the mixed use type of development around that would really then support transit. And again, we might see those numbers from the poll go up a little bit more. Making sure that we have sustainable design, smart growth we talked about, making sure that we target growth more towards these town centers where there's infrastructure and opportunities for redevelopment, rather than in the green fields, which have more of an impact on the environment. And lastly, making sure that we do this in an open and transparent process. So this is the second meeting today that we've had on the Odenton Town Center Master Plan. We've also launched an online survey, which if you go to the website, you can find there and take the survey. The survey is going to ask you the same questions that you're asked in the breakout rooms. So again, don't feel like you're missing anything if you don't take the survey. It's really intended for folks that don't have the opportunity to attend these meetings. In addition to the online survey, we also have a paper survey that is also now available in the Odenton Library in the lobby there, which is open. You do not need to make an appointment to visit the lobby of the Odenton Library. So in the built environment, there are a few recommendations. Here are the ones regarding transportation, where we talk about making sure we have bicycle pedestrian facilities, a vibrant trail network, as well as roadway and transit improvements to not only manage the traffic congestion, but again, talking about public transportation, if there might be opportunities for bus service. So I don't need to read each one of these items here under the built environment, but I do want to just mention that being a town center, this is one, I do want to emphasize that this is one of the areas where we do want to target development and redevelopment. That when you're building a mixed use or a community that has residential in close proximity to retail, as well as those green spaces where families can come out and hang out or play, you are really creating this this sense of community and a live, work, learn, and play type of community. Also looking at the natural environment, we don't want all this to just be development, impervious surface. We want to make sure that there's an urban tree canopy as well. And again, making sure that we coordinate with the Fort Meade folks, and we have met with those representatives to make sure that what they're doing on the fort helps the Odenton area and vice versa, making sure that it's a symbiotic relationship. So I do just want to run down then the process for this actual Odenton Town Center Master Plan update. We held our first kickoff meeting in January with, again, OTCAC is the Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee. They meet the last Tuesday of every month. Here we are on March 18th with our first public meeting, as well as some surveys that'll be released. And we'll also, because we're just getting a large amount of data today, we're going to take that data, digest it a little bit, sort of pull out some of the major themes, and then come back with a follow-up survey next month that'll help us drill down into some more of the specifics. At that time, that'll also help us start drafting elements of the plan. And I also do want to mention that our Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee meeting in another week and a half, we'll start the visioning process. So really the top level here is very general. What's the vision for Odenton? Is it a live, work, play type of space or community? Emphasizing transit options. So we're going to talk about that at that meeting. The public is welcome to attend. There, again, there's information on our website, which I'll share shortly. So then we'll start drafting the plan. And then as we get to the end of that draft, we'll put it out to the public for review, and we'll have another public meeting. And that'll really give us the sense of, are we on the right track? What type of tweaks do we need to make to the master plan? We'll make those, and then we'll start the legislative process by getting it reviewed by the Planning Advisory Board, and then an introduction to the County Council. So outcomes real quickly for this master plan process, it really starts with the public. We can't have a successful plan without public input. You're the community, you know, you're living it every day. You need to tell us what's working, what's not working, so that we can then reflect this in a plan that again sets that vision, and we can then hang strategies on that can then be implemented. So again, the first part, starting with an engaged public, and then drafting a plan that's respected and has support, because again, it's been a ground up process. And then a vision and recommended actions that address those concerns, and making sure then those actions are implemented. And then we want to make sure that those implementation progress is actually measured. We want to have metrics. And in planning, it's really a cyclical process where you do public engagement, draft the plan, implement the plan, measure the plan, see how it's doing, and where you see you might be falling short, you start the process all over again and draft a new plan to make sure that it's current and up to date. So like I mentioned, with this version of the Odenton Town Center master plan, we want to allow the master plan to function with just goals, policies, and strategies, addressing more or less those topics there. It's not an exhaustive list. And then we want to pull those requirements out and put those into the county code, the design manual, other regulatory documents that developers typically need to go to identify what they can build on their site. So with that, we're going to now go into breakout groups. And the facilitator, breakout groups of about 10, 12 people. And the facilitator will ask a series of questions, 3 questions, more or less, what do you like about Odenton? What are the challenges in Odenton? And then really a question that gets at that vision of, how do you envision Odenton growing or being in the next 10 years? So again, as if you were to move away for right now, come back in 10 years, what would you like to see the community be? We want you to take your time with these responses, think about it, and then we're going to share as a group within our breakout groups, and then we're going to reconvene, and the facilitators will share more or less a summary of what was discussed. And then once we're done reconvening and sharing a summary, we'll talk about next steps and wrap up for the evening. Okay. So with that, I am going to break us up into the breakout rooms. And so you'll disappear for a moment and you'll shortly join a room with a facilitator. Okay, so enjoy and see everyone shortly. Okay, I think we're all back. And like I said, I hope everybody had a robust discussion answering some of these questions and talking about looking ahead as to what the vision may be here within Odenton. So I'm going to go around the room and ask our facilitators to provide a summary. And I'll start with Patrick, if you don't mind.
Sure. So in our group, in terms of what do we like about Odenton? Our group members talked about feeling very, very connected to the community. They like this accessibility, enjoy being able to walk to work, using walking trails and paths. There are a lot of services and particularly medical facilities in the area. Um, and also is noted that this area has good weather, and that may be an opportunity for outdoor amenities. In terms of challenges, walkability was also a bit of a challenge, and we're wanting some safer options for walkability. There are gaps in the sidewalks in places, and sometimes that forces somebody to walk on, you know, this side of the road or on a cow path. So that gets to be kind of challenging. Would like to see more shopping options, more restaurants, and then in particular, traffic was mentioned as being a particular challenge for the area. And then in terms of a vision for what they'd like to see in Odenton in the next 10 years, again, improved walkability and connectivity, more live work kind of amenities all in the same area, more boutique shops similar to, say, Ellicott City, not so much of the big box type of stores, though, more of a small town feel. Leesburg, Virginia was held up as a potential example of a place to look at that has built up a good bit, but it retained its small town charm, has a lot of great paths, a lot of close blocks with gridded streets, and so very walkable and a lot to actually walk to all in one area. And finally, just that Odenton would have, again, more things to do, more entertainment, theaters, so that people who live there don't have to so much drive somewhere else to enjoy those kinds of things.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Carrie, do you want to share the discussion from your group?
Yeah, thanks. For my groups, things we're appreciating about Odenton, we had a lot of MARC writers in our group. So this group finds that access to the MARC was a benefit. It comes with the challenge of terrible traffic. So a lot of our sort of assets were obviously the other side of the coin is the challenge that goes along with that asset. People were appreciating some specific amenities, such as the library. There was a shout out for the library. However, we were hoping that the library could also kind of develop some more public green space or kind of outdoor programming, be better connected to the surrounding community. People appreciate the walkability throughout a lot of Odenton, but there was also discussion in our group about the lack of sidewalks, a lack of a cohesive sidewalk network, dangerous intersections. There was some feeling that there is a lack of like kind of neighborhood cohesion, even as everyone who spoke really appreciated the neighborhood where they live. They weren't necessarily, there wasn't like a community feel that was shared among all of the Odenton folks. And there's some like built infrastructure like sidewalks that our group identified as maybe helping that. Another challenge that we spent some time on is the cost of housing in Odenton. We had a mix of homeowners and renters. We have a mix of new residents and longer time residents in our group, and those living in older neighborhoods as well as newer construction. And this was sort of something that was shared among all folks, as an observation that the housing costs are really kind of becoming unmanageable for current residents, as well as great concern about it being unmanageable for the sorts of folks that Odenton, the military installations around Odenton are going to attract in the future. So our Odenton of 10 years from now is going to be one where there is more housing affordability. We would like to see a stronger sense of community. National Harbor in Maryland was cited as one place that people really appreciate. There's a lot of getting outdoors. There's a lot of community gathering space. Movies on Sunday was cited. And just like also better understanding of kind of the folks that we think are going to move to Odenton in 10 years. There's some theories in our group that that's mostly going to be military people. So really understanding like what the kind of needs of that population is and making sure that Odenton can meet it. And I would be remiss not to mention all of the love in our group for the mom and pop businesses. Everybody wants to see more of those. they really appreciate being able to go to the ones that are there, and they wish that there was more in the vacancies that currently exist. So thanks.
Great, good discussion. Brent.
All right. We also had a really good discussion, really productive discussion. I appreciated a number of the perspectives that came out in the process. So off the bat, starting with the positives, what do we like about Odenton? One unique thing that I heard was that Odenton has a certain charm to it. And it has a lot of potential with that charm. And I thought that that was something that's quite interesting. There was talk about it being kind of having a small town feel. It's right next door to DC. It's right next to these large employers, Fort Meade, NSA, and yet you kind of have that kind of pocket small town feel. And that was something that's really appreciated. And that's coupled with the fact that there's a train station right in the middle of town. So in theory, there's great pedestrian access. There's really good multimodal access. Another thing that was appreciated is the fact that there's a library right next door to the train station. So again, just sort of going to that theme of pedestrian access. And then, as was mentioned already, proximity to large employers like Fort Meade and NSA. Challenges also had some really unique, interesting perspectives. One I'll call out at the top here is concerns about sediment and erosion due to poor development practices. In the past, Odenton has been something of a perpetrator in this front, and also there are a number of other instances throughout the state and even the county. So it's definitely, if there's going to be development, we need to do it with some best practices in place. Types of retail was also a challenge, right? So there's fast food, there's some Mexican restaurants, there's some gas stations, but there isn't really a good healthy mix of retail options right now. And increasing that diversity of retail options is definitely something that came up as something we're interested in. On that note of retail, what brings people to the town center, and that's places shop, but it's also ways to get around. So it's been touched on already, but walkability was a big theme as far as challenges are concerned. Walkability, sidewalks that don't connect well, sidewalks that are bumpy, uneven, sidewalks that are too close to the road with drivers who don't drive safely. So just a sense of discomfort and even danger while trying to get around on foot or in some capacity that's not within a vehicle. And continuing with that theme, wayfinding is an issue. How do you get around? How do you get to the library? How do you get to the MARC station? There isn't good signage or other wayfinding amenities to direct pedestrians. And another thing we talked about was a need for an improvement with the first and last mile connectivity. We discussed this idea of like a positive feedback loop. And so right now it's difficult to get to the train station, right? So for a lot of people, the only reasonable choice is to get in your car, drive to the train station and park there. And so that creates more traffic. It creates overflow in the parking lot. It makes it less safe for pedestrians. And so how do we actually encourage people to get to the train station without having to get into their car? Because that's, something that we're trying to, the whole point of getting a train is you don't have to drive your car. So how do we improve that? Moving on to the future. So in 10 years time, what would we like to see here? And definitely a lot of talk of preserving green spaces, of improving connectivity as far as the sidewalks concerned, as far as the pedestrian is concerned, improving those first and last mile connectivity options. We talked about the park, the proposed park that's going in next to the library. And how can that be done in a way that turns it into an urban forest? An urban forest maybe with some education, some educational materials in there. You can maybe learn about specimen trees, learn about different flora and fauna that's native to the area. And then just kind of going back again to the idea of maximizing the charm that is sort of innate in Odenton. So how do we get a better mix of retail? How do we beautify the streets? How do we bring in public art? These are all things that we'd like to see in the next 10 years. And the last thing I'll mention is an interesting idea, but we talked about sort of that positive feedback loop, and doing a little bit now can have sort of a reinforcing effect. And so what could that potentially be? And the idea of an anchor store actually came in. And an anchor store, you see that in a mall, right? And a certain kind of store comes in and it creates a certain aesthetic or a certain idea of what the mall is, which brings in a certain kind of clientele. That's something that we would like to see in Odenton. So it was a productive conversation. I really appreciate everyone who contributed.
Great, thanks, Brent. Don, do you want to share?
Sure. 1 second. As far as things that my group liked about Odenton, I'll just try to not repeat some of the things we heard earlier, but of course, the MARC train, the centrality to Baltimore, DC, and Annapolis. Also, the historic church next to the train station, the bike trails, really likes the library, giant sycamore trees as well. As far as challenges, not a lot of overflow parking at the MARC station. The light is a problem with getting out. Some of the developments near the train station, as far as the way to get out, to be reduced down to 1 lane. It can take 25 minutes to get out. Even walking to the train station can lead to a lot of weird routes that people don't want to take. So there's a lot of car dependency in the Odenton area for a small area. So again, as other people have mentioned, the lack of walkability, lack of sidewalk connections, especially along 175 and 170. Yes, and as far as also just more shopping choices, more food option choices would also be greatly appreciated. As far as things they would like to see in Odenton in the next 10 years, possibly bus rapid transit or a bus priority lane, net carbon neutral policies in the code, whether that's making things EV ready or solar ready, and no new gas service in Odenton and protected bike lanes. Try to limit single family dwelling zoning with more flexibilities for accessory dwelling units and duplexes in Odenton and in the county overall. Remembering to protect older citizens who may not be able to walk, and provide more public transportation and support seniors to live in dignity. Other examples that they've provided for places to possibly model will be Annapolis Town Center, the Bowie Town Center, Laurel, and downtown Catonsville as well. And finally, replacing invasive species in the area with native landscaping.
Great, thanks. Sounds like a good discussion. And lastly, our group, we had Teresa, and George, Rowan, and Tavona, who had to leave, but she actually lives across the street from the train station, and said I think she wanted to move to that area because of the proximity to the train station and some shops nearby. So I'll kind of highlight, I think, our top 3 items from each of these questions. And what do you like about Odenton? One of the things we talked about was it actually has the attention of the county, has the attention of potential financial incentives, and just general support of where that's where development and redevelopment is going to happen. Folks also enjoyed the diversity and the socioeconomic diversity within the area as well, that it wasn't just a homogenous type of community, or even just not even just a planned community, that there was a lot of unique aspects to it. And successful businesses, the Giant moving into the Odenton Shopping Center in the past few years has really created a lot of buzz in the area, and has been very successful and in of itself, as well as attracting additional businesses within the area as well. With question number 2, what are the challenges in Odenton? That's also a flip side, is there have also been retail that has not been successful. For example, a couple stores actually on the Sappington Station Road Circle that have changed hands X number of times, or several times over the past couple of years. So how do we make sure that their retail can be successful in these areas? Boomtown, the area in North Odenton across from Fort Meade. How do we improve the character of that area, and if there's potential for redevelopment? And lastly, with challenges, was the consideration of how COVID might affect the office market. So one thing we had talked about was if there's potential for office at the MARC station and how that might make sense. But again, with COVID and everybody teleworking or participating in a virtual meeting like tonight, how might that impact some of these markets? So one of those challenges that we may see here in Odenton and really nationally. How would you like to see Odenton in 10 years? We talked about how there's a senior center, but are there good youth centers within the area and other amenities for the youth? So when they get out of school, what can keep them busy and safe? Combining green space during development, make sure that there can be some type of cohesiveness between developers so that you can create one giant stand of trees rather than just sort of a couple smaller blocks within each property. And if there's a potential to create a fee in lieu program, where instead of a property owner being required to protect X number of trees, if they can pay into a fund and then that fund, which has accumulated over several years or through contributions from developers, actually purchase some meaningful land, and you might be able to provide some type of amenity on that piece of land as well. And I think lastly is just sort of a reality check, is could this actually be a Bethesda, a downtown Bethesda? And if not, then I think some of the requirements or the goals and policies actually need to reflect that reality, that this just isn't that type of urban community, that it might be some type of scaled down version of Bethesda or something more unique. So I think those were the highlights from our group. Anybody else want to chime in, George or Teresa or Rowan, that are still on the line? No. Okay. So I'm going to bring up the slides again, and we'll kind of wrap up then for this evening. Okay, so our next steps in this process, like I said, is this was really one of the first kickoff meetings. We just wanted to touch base with the public, hear what your thoughts were about what's working, what's not working generally, and setting a vision. So like I said, is at our next Odenton Town Center Advisory Committee meeting, which is March 30th, the last Tuesday of each month. We're going to do a quick debrief with our members, talk about these meetings and sort of some of the themes that we heard. We're also going to start developing a vision statement for the master plan. So again, that third question that we talked about this evening, how do you see Odenton in 10 years? Like I said, there is an online survey, which is now live at this website down here below at aacounty.org/OTC. If you want to tell friends and family, colleagues that may have missed this meeting and didn't provide any input, that they're free to take that online survey. But if they prefer also sort of a hard copy, that's also available at the Odenton Library in the lobby, like I mentioned. And those surveys will run for the next 2 weeks or so until April 4th. After we sort of take an opportunity to combine all our notes here from this evening, talk about what we've heard, we're going to create a meeting summary that'll be posted online. And we'll also post the recordings from these meetings online as well. So like I said, we had a session this afternoon, and we'll be posting that online as well so that you can hear some of the summary from folks from this afternoon. We're going to do a follow-up survey. Like I said, this has been a big data dump here. We need to sift through it, identify what some of those key themes were, and then we want to shop it back out to the community and say, maybe rank these items. What's your biggest priority in the environment? What are some of the design guidelines you'd like to see within Odenton? So it'll really, again, give us an opportunity to drill deeper into some of the data that we've received tonight. Our next in-person meeting will be to review the draft plan. I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide here, and you've already seen it here. Like I said, here's that follow-up survey in sometime in April. And then we're going to start drafting the plan. And then once we get a final draft plan, we'll put that out on our website. We'll make it available to the public, and you'll have an opportunity to review it. And we'll reconvene here as a group virtually or in person if it allows, and talk about sort of, are we on the right track? What are we missing? What additional tweaks do we need to make to the plan? And as always, again, please always visit aacounty.org/OTC. That's where we continually post updates. Like I said, in the next few days, we'll have those recordings of these meetings posted. In a few weeks after that, we'll have the meeting summaries and then a follow-up survey as well. You can sign up to be on the mailing list by sending a quick email to otc@aacounty.org. Just let us know that you want to be on the mailing list, and we'll add you to our distribution list. And of course, you can use that email address if you have any additional questions or comments. So that's it for this evening. Again, I'll leave this slide up here so you can have the website as well as the email address. So let me put that back up there. Sorry, I took that down too quickly. So with that, I know we're down to about 27 folks. I know we've lost folks. We've still got about 5 more minutes to go. If anybody wants to hang out, I can answer any questions or comments you might have. And again, Jesse, I've got the gallery view, so I can't see everybody in case they're raising their hand. Any questions or comments? So I'm not seeing any. And with that, again, I appreciate everybody's time tonight. I know you've got plenty of other places to be. So again, really appreciate the time and staying engaged in this process. Please continue to follow along on that website, and please sign up for email alerts as they become available. And with that, I'll conclude the meeting then. And everybody can have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.